Here we go.
We are going to call the Novi Board of Education regular meeting to order. It is December 1st. If we can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business is approval of the agenda.
Madam
Mr.
President,
Cook?
I'd like to pull the approval of the field trips out of consent agenda and move it into action items if we could, please, so we can have a discussion.
Okay, can you make a motion?
I would make a motion to pull approval of the field trips out of consent and move it to action. Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mr. Mena. All in favor of that motion?
Can you help me understand why?
I'd like to have a discussion on it.
Anything in consent we can't discuss, it's just a yea or nay vote.
I'm familiar with how this works, so that's fine. Okay, I just wanted to understand.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We will move on to celebrations.
Can we approve the agenda as amended?
Sure, if you want to.
I move we approve the
Yeah.
agenda as amended.
Sure, would you like to make a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Roney. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Now we can move on to celebrations. So if any board members have any celebrations they'd like to share, or Mr. Meinke, if you have some things.
I do. Today, I had the opportunity, and actually yesterday as well, to participate with the NEF in presenting several of our teachers with their teacher grant awards. And that is the first time I have ever been a part of something like that. And it was almost like Christmas. And everybody was super gracious and grateful. And I think there's two things that I took away from it. The innovation of our teachers and the thoughtfulness that they had in the grant requests that they made were just incredible. It just blew me away. Also was the generosity of the NEF and what they did to do that. So it was just really, really kind of a neat thing to surprise some of our staff with some things that are going to directly impact kids in really cool ways. So it was a really neat day today.
Great. Any other celebrations that any board members would like to share? Mrs. Hood?
Yes, just a brief thing. I would like to celebrate one of our wonderful teachers, Brian Langley. He is always an example of exemplary leadership in our teacher ranks. And he just did his episode 4 of his second season of Thriving Educators podcasts. And I've listened to a few of them. Last year, I did mention his podcast with Hattie McGuire after she had been teaching for 20 years and why she still loved it and how she kept her approach fresh with her students. And his topic with his last episode, we just got an email on it the other day, with Amber Loney, who was our Teacher of the Year, but also her discussion was lessons from virtual kindergarten. And I just want to say, as a person who has never stood in front of a classroom with 20-some little faces looking at me and having to be on every day, in my work, I'm on Zoom half of my day, and sometimes when I'm not camera ready, I just turn my camera off. And our teachers have to be camera ready all the time and be prepared, and they have to manage their classrooms and work with parents and make sure that all of their students learn what they need to learn. And it's just something that I think of myself as a fairly competent person, but it would overwhelm me. And so I'd like to recognize and celebrate Mr. Langley, but also all of the teachers. If you look at his episodes, he's had so many teachers contribute, and it's just a wonderful program that he runs from within our schools.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other board celebrations? none? Okay, we will move on to the consent agenda. This evening on our consent agenda, as amended, we have approval of the minutes, which are the regular meeting minutes of November 17th. So if I can get a motion for the recommendation? Mr. Cook?
I move that the Novi Community Schools Board of Education approve consent item A as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Roney. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We will have our opportunity for comments from the audience. If you would like to make a comment, please fill out a green card, and Sheila will get that up to Mr. Cook so he can call you up to the podium. The board respectfully requests that any individuals wishing to speak to the board provide their name and address, any organization they represent, and keep their comments to the allotted time of 3 minutes. Refrain from directing comments to individual members of the board, district employees, or members of the audience. So, Mr. Cook, it looks like you have 1 card this evening.
Mr. Woods?
2? Yep, you got it.
Good evening, Board. Dewan Woods, Berkshire Point neighborhood. And actually, I'm speaking today as a parent. The Thanksgiving holiday gave my family a chance to reflect on what's taken place in the past year and spending time talking to my son, my 8-year-old son, about things that he's been thinking about and what it means to him to be thankful. And he brought up being back with his friends, being back in school. And so I reflected on this, and I've been preaching a message of unity, and I'll stand by this message one more time. I'll say that this is a remarkable time of thanks for all that we've gone through, but where we stand now, this is a blessing. And I'm so appreciative of the new board members that are going to join, and also the board members who've done the service you all have done over the last 6 years. Is incredible. And so this is a message of unity. We have a chance to come together as a community, and I hope we can reset and take it to a whole new level. And regardless of ranking and scores, that doesn't matter. What does matter is how do we all hold each other accountable, but then also give each other grace. How we appreciate the efforts of each of us. We bring strengths to the table that sometimes we don't appreciate. And so this is a community that I really do feel we have more in common than we don't. And this is our opportunity to come together. One last thing. I do believe one other thing that this is a part of my personal belief system, but I do believe that we have a community filled with talented individuals, parents who come from different backgrounds, experiences, professions, but our greatest strength also is our parents being able to weigh into what you all are doing, whether it's career mentorship, whether it's helping their companies become connected to the district, whether it's them sharing their experiences with students as mentors, as advocates, as advisors. I think this is an area that, looking into the new year, there's an opportunity to enlist us as parents to help you all do a great job to support the young people and kids in the community. So that's it. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cook?
Mrs. Boudouin?
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to, I know I'm not really supposed to address any individual, but wanted to thank Mr. Meinka for sending out the information about the smart gun safety in the newsletter that we received this morning. And so thank you. And I wanted to also ask the board as a whole to consider having that presentation brought in because those newsletters, well, some people read them. They can be a little wordy, and at times, maybe some people miss them, right? Not like your newsletter specifically, but newsletters in general can be long.
That's good feedback.
Speaking
Never
about
heard
you
that
directly, Mr. Meinka. But you don't understand. So I think that sometimes we skim, and so I would love to have that information highlighted a little bit more for our community. And I do think it's really an important thing. So hopefully, if it's not on the agenda soon, we can hopefully get it on there at some point soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
No offense on the newsletters.
I'll take it.
Alrighty, donations is listed on the agenda. We do not have any donations this evening, so we will move on to closed session for the purpose of negotiations. If I may get a motion from a board member, and just so you know, before we approve this, we will not be gone long, like 10 minutes, so it'll be a very quick closed session. Mr. Cook?
I move that the Novi Community Schools Board of Education move to closed session for the purpose of negotiations under OMA Section 8 and 2.
Thank you. Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mr. Mena. If we can get a roll call vote with Ms. Murphy?
Yes. Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Hood?
Yes.
Mr. Mena?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy, yes. Mrs. Roney?
Yes.
Dr. Ruskin?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. So we will be back shortly and continue on with our agenda.
Hey, there's a thing of candy in there. Come on.
Oh, I thought you were going to see me. Whatever.
Okay, we are out of closed session, so we will continue on with our agenda. We have 5 action items. We have first the personnel report. Mr. Meinka.
I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Carino to present the personnel report this evening.
Thank you very much. We have one position change. Stephanie Mack will be transitioning from being a sub bus driver into an unofficial bus driver for our transportation department.
If we can get a motion for the recommendation, please. Mrs. Roney?
That the Novi Community School District Board of Ed adopts the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Roney and supported by Mr. Cook. Any questions or comments?
How are we doing on bus driver positions?
So this was a great new hire. So we have, we're fully staffed to my
Fully
knowledge.
staffed and full-time, but we have enough subs and,
We're always looking for more, just because it's better to have too many than too little for subs. I know that Cindy Valentine is constantly looking and recruiting, and so, right now, we're doing okay, but, you know, obviously with the winter and illnesses, we always don't want to cut it too close.
well, plus we would like a few more for athletic teams and stuff, because
Yeah.
it's a great expense to charter those guys there.
Yeah.
Good places.
And Stephanie is here tonight, if, once you vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get 'em-
Hey,
We'll take
Stephanie.
a vote first, and then we will welcome Stephanie. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Perfect. I would like to invite Stephanie up, welcome officially to Novi. Yay.
Awesome.
Hail to the bus driver.
Hi.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Mack, and I, thank you, was recently promoted to permanent driver. I've lived in Novi for 15 years. I have 6 kids that have all went to Novi, 2 at Meadows still, 5th and 6th grader. And I definitely saw the need for drivers as we were driving, to school for the last couple of years. So I'm happy to be here and help out and serve the community.
Awesome.
We're glad you stepped up.
Wish more parents would step up like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Welcome.
Really appreciate it.
Okay, we will move on to our next action item, which is the telecommunications infrastructure phone system upgrade. Mr. Meinka.
In the 2019 bond, there was allocation provided for the replacement of our telecommunications infrastructure. So this project will replace all the telecommunications systems and phone systems, to be specific, in the district, including upgrading our old copper lines to the Fiber One network through Oakland County. The total project cost is $251,703.29.
Thank you. If I can get a motion for the recommendation? Mrs. Hood?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education award the telecommunications phone system upgrade project to Logicalis Incorporated for a total project cost of $251,703.29 and authorize the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations to expend the funds from the 2019 bond fund.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Hood and supported by Ms. Murphy. Any questions or comments? I know this was on our agenda for information and discussion last time. Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. We will move on to our next action item, which is bid package number 12, Novi Storage Addition to Maintenance Campus. Mr. Meinka.
So at our last board meeting, we talked about the need to add storage to our maintenance facility. We do have with the sale of the Bosco Fields property, the maintenance facility that's there will obviously not be usable. So we're gonna be exploring expanding our maintenance facility to encompass all of those pieces of equipment. Sealed bids were taken on Tuesday, October 25th, and also on Wednesday, November 2nd. This came before the board for information and discussion at the November 17th meeting, and the entire recommendation for the award for this project is $1,134,769.
Can I get a motion for the recommendation, please?
I'll move.
Thank you.
I'll move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education award the contracts as listed for a total award of $1,134,769 and authorize the Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations to expend the funds from the 2019 bond fund.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Murphy and supported by Mrs. Roney. Do we have any questions or comments? I know that we had that very fancy drawing last time.
No, I'll just say, when we had the maintenance department here, I know that that was one of their concerns, just where are they gonna put stuff, so I'm glad that we're managed to resolve that, and I know I asked at the last meeting, Ben, if this would be resolved before, in a timely fashion, so that we aren't in a gap, and you assured me that you're working with the city on that.
Yep, and in fact, I met with the city just earlier this week, and in the event that we run into a delay, they would allow us some additional time in the facility if needed.
Okay, fantastic.
Great. Mr. Cook?
Did Mr. Smith's questions last week get answered about the trailers, and there's also a storage container that's there, do we have spots?
Yep, we are looking at, there's a spot actually on the South High School part of the campus that we're looking at right now for behind where some of those storage pods are. The real interesting thing is that no one can identify who owns the trailers. We don't have any titles for them. We don't really know who they belong to. But we are trying to figure that out. But we will have a home for them until we determine what we're gonna do with them. So it's looking like it's gonna be, I think, on the south property that we are gonna acquire from the city.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. We will move on to the next action item, which is the visitor policy. Mr. Miko.
So this policy came about because we have a program in our district that's actually, the district has actually owned, but we had a change in the law, so there has not necessarily been a policy that's reflected that law. And the system is called Raptor. And what Raptor does is it really provides another safety measure where a volunteer or a visitor that's entering the building, and really it's a visitor when they enter the building, would produce their ID card, and then they would be able to be run through a quick background check to make sure that they're on any of the sex offender registries or anything like that. This is really most commonly seen when we have a contractor, so you might have somebody that's coming to service a copy machine in a teacher's lounge or something like that. And if they're gonna be in the building, right, this is another safety precaution to say we wanna make sure that they're not somebody who may pose a potential danger to a student or a staff member. So we had a lot of conversation at the policy committee. We've talked about this at a few board meetings. This is the language that was presented at the last board meeting for information and discussion and is there for your approval this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. If I can get a motion for this recommendation. Mr. Mena?
Yeah, I move that we approve the visitor policy as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mena and supported by Ms. Roney. Any other questions or discussion points on this? I know we've talked about it quite a bit. No? Okay. Seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to our next action item, which is the Novi Education Personnel Association, which is NESPA, the contract. Mr. Miko.
So this is an exciting day. We had a really nice negotiations with our Educator Support Professionals Association, NESPA, and we met with them on October 27th. It was a very cordial, very collaborative meeting. These individuals do so much for our schools. In fact, I think any good principal will tell you who runs the school, and it's really the secretary, right? And so at the end of the day, we're really excited to be able to come to an agreement with them on their wage reopener, and that is there for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. If we can get a motion for this recommendation. Mrs. Murphy?
I'll move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve contract agreement with the Novi Educational Support Personnel Association.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Murphy and supported by Mrs. Roney. Any comments or questions regarding this?
I'm just glad for the team and that the negotiations went well. I know that they are called to do a lot in that position that they're in, and we have a lot of really great people in those positions. And they tend to stay a long time, which is awesome.
I agree. Do we have any other comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Our final action item is the approval of the field trip that was moved on the agenda from consent to action. So, Mr. Meinka?
We have a field trip that was recommended. I think that this was a late addition ad, and so it's there for your approval this evening. This is a field trip that is a thespian festival that's heading towards the west side of the state. So that was there for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. If I can get a motion? Mr. Smith?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approves the Michigan Thespian Festival in Lansing, December 9th, 2022 through December 10th, 2022.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Smith and supported by Mrs. Murphy. Any comments or questions? Mr. Cook?
Yeah, I had this pulled to discussion because it's next weekend. And a lot of the forms that they fill out are, 6 weeks to have them in 6 weeks ahead of time. I know Emily Polanski did yeoman's work in trying to organize the field trips and the forms that they're using and get those done. And I do believe this isn't even the form that we ended up resolving on, because it says it should have been in 12 weeks ahead of time. Yeah, I don't want to punish the kids, but, this is coming to us at the last minute again, like some others have. And I say again also because I've looked back and historically, the Thespian Festival has come the board meeting before, for approval, the board meeting before the actual festival. So, I will not be supporting this because I think that we really need to get everything narrowed down to what Mrs. Polanski had developed and using that, and things need to be in on time. This is something that's an annual thing, and there's no reason why it couldn't have been in on time.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Cook. Mr. Smith?
Has anyone at this table reached out to Heather and sought to understand why it was a late request? Stuff happens. I know from sitting at this table, we've approved numerous last-minute field trips. If we want to adopt a policy to no longer do that, then we have the authority to do so. So I think we either need to continue to accept late submittals or draw a line in the sand and say there's no exceptions. Being a former theater arts major, although this thing happens every year, you can see we're not spending really any money other than what it might cost to compensate Heather for her time. But I think, again, being a member of these things in the past, a lot of times it comes down to, hey, it's coming up again. Anyone want to go? Because if no students want to participate, there's no reason to submit the request. It's difficult for me to get my 16-year-old to commit to doing something 2 hours from now, much less 12 weeks or 6 weeks from now. So I'm just saying, I think either we take these things as they come, or we draw a line in the sand. But I agree with Paul's point of I hate to penalize the kids. I know Heather does great work for us in a tough role. So I just think that it comes down to getting these 3 students to commit at some point that they really want to attend and pay out of pocket not only the $210 to attend, but the gas, because it's all private cars, there's no bus transportation. So the private cars or the people that are carpooling are paying for the gas to go to Lansing, to and from, so it's a tough one. So I just I'll support whatever we decide as a board, but either we just draw a line in the sand and say if it's not on the right form and it's not within 6 weeks, don't even bother to submit it, or we seek to understand why one might be coming at us later, but no one here sought to understand why it was a late request. We've approved many others in the past. I don't know why this is any different.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Personally, and then I'll let you two go, I'll be supporting this, because certainly I want the kids to be able to go, but I do, I am hearing what Mr. Cook is saying, and the reason that he apparently had it pulled off the consent agenda. So I'm just gonna ask the administration to work towards a resolution towards this, and either getting the forms adapted so that we're not putting ourselves in a position where we're needing to approve things even though they're out of conformance with what the rules state, you know, getting back with Ms. Polonsky on that, and then just working with your administrative team to communicate with their staff how the importance of, it kind of puts us in a bind, so. Mrs. Murphy?
Well, I was just gonna say, because I'm an honorary thespian, so not a full thespian. And my daughter did go to this event a few years ago. And I do know a little bit about, I mean, I don't know if, to your point, I agree with both your points, quite honestly. Like, having a system in place and then honoring the system, I think is kind of important. And I think we have been a little loose with that. I don't know if there's certain, but I don't know if there's certain events that our kids go to that, like, I remember one year, the reason it came to us late is because the time frame for the 6 weeks, it hadn't been set, the event had not been set in place. So there's exceptions to that occasionally, but without knowing what those exceptions are, right, we don't get that information, so I don't know if that can even be built in. I know you're right, she did a yeoman's work, because I talked to her about it a few weeks ago, trying to make this the process a little bit more streamlined for teachers as well. Whether that's been completely rolled out to everyone, I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, I will be supporting it, but I agree that it really needs to be tightened up as we move forward, so that, if we know that there's even a layout of a monthly, events, or monthly. Yearly field trips, or monthly, I mean, there's multiple field trips every month. Like, if we know when the most of those are, it seems to me like even having some ability to look at that and say, okay, have we got the paperwork for this yet? I mean, I don't know what that process is, you guys are up to the house, but I think that trying to honor the system that's in place is definitely something we need to really work at moving forward. On behalf of our students too, because $210, like, that's, I know the one year, the one kid couldn't afford to go, kind of, couldn't figure out how to afford to go, the year that my daughter went, so the number, I don't know, this needs to be 3 with a question mark, right? I mean, you can always fill it out with, potential, what you think the potential is as well. I don't know if that's on the new form or not, because I have not seen those new forms, I don't think, did we see those new forms? Maybe we did.
Yeah, we will work
Sorry.
on getting those distributed to the whole staff and make that, known. The other piece to this is there are some trips that do happen annually, that we might be able to look at those even on a summer resolution, to be able to say, we know that these trips occur, do we have any issues with these on a yearly basis? And then the ones that are coming to you on a regular basis might be a new or kind of a one-off or some sort of a new field trip that would be an overnight trip. So I think there's some room to improve that process for sure. Yeah.
And that's what we did with the sports, with Mr. Wachowski, we had worked through that and done a chunk.
Yeah, so there's maybe a way to do that with performing arts as well, because the
Sure.
band.
Yeah, Mr. Mena?
No, I was gonna say, I think it's well within Mr. Cook's, responsibility to bring this, to our attention. I'll be supporting this, obviously, I don't wanna see the kids, miss this, but, asking for some consistency, would be great. I don't really think it's my position to call Heather McKeag to find out, why she submitted this late. I would imagine that you've gotten some message strong from this board, and you'll find out, and you'll fix it. So.
Thanks,
And
Mr.
maybe and it might be that it is impossible for her to do it for there might be some extenuating circumstance that we just don't know about, so.
Yep.
Since you bring that up, trustee Mena, it appeared tonight on our consent agenda. Somebody had to approve putting it on tonight's agenda under the column of consent. Who did that?
Well, what happens in general is any field trips that have happened in the past go under consent agenda. And so the only reason that they would be found in the action section is if they are a new field trip. But the rule of thumb is that field trips go under consent agenda unless they are a new field trip.
Or if we haven't taken it in a number of years, I think they do
Correct.
it then too.
Yeah, It's some, if
Go
I
ahead.
can
You were
also,
still
if at some
going.
point, and this is just more a point of order going forward with regards to Mr. Cook's request to pull a consent agenda item out. I know that's something that doesn't happen too often, but it's something that on occasion we've wanted to do. I'm not so sure that it requires a board vote to do that. Again, I don't know for sure, but we should be able to look at, I think pretty much any time a board member wants to pull out anything out of any type of consent item, they should be able to do it without a board vote. Again, I could be wrong, but that is my understanding.
Okay, we'll look into that. Mrs. Roney, do you have a
I
comment?
just, I know we've had quite a few field trips come before us late. And I know that's probably the reason Mrs. Polonsky redid the stuff, because I know Paul and this board has asked of field trip people to get them in. You know, and I realize that, you know, if it's a state finals or something like that, you know, you can't do the 6 weeks. But I think a lot of these, it can be done ahead of time. And I agree with Paul, but I will support this, but I do agree with Paul.
Thank you, Mrs. Roney. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Cook?
Yeah, as long as everybody else has had a chance. Over the past year, we've approved 24 field trips under consent items. There have been 3 different forms used with varying times. But since this field trip was approved this time last year, like I said, historically, this field trip has come in the meeting before it happens. So, yeah, it's more about the process. I do not want to penalize the kids. There's only 3 kids, not 100 and some kids like it would be for the robotics or DECA or HOSA, which is 300 and some. Yeah, it's all about what this man to my right has said quite a bit. It's systems, and we get the systems in place, and we use those systems. So,
Yep. And I will say Ms. Polonsky did a phenomenal job, and she worked with a team of, I believe, 5 or 6 people to really build a process that has not been deployed yet. It was just finished within the last couple weeks. So
yeah.
as we deploy it, I'm confident that we'll be able to cut down on these types of things.
Would you or Sheila then reach out to Emily and perhaps ask her to include? I mean, I'm sure that 6-week number is arbitrary. I don't know if the magic number is 6 weeks, 4 weeks. Obviously, at one point it was 12 weeks. But if someone does submit a form with less than a 6-week notice, can there be a place on the form for them to offer an explanation of why? And then whoever's reviewing these things, deciding to put them on the agenda, can appropriately place them under an action item to be discussed or under a consent item to just be approved.
Yep. Great.
Makes sense, a great idea. Mr. Cook?
Yeah, the other part of this is, as Trustee Smith said, you know, may not have known what kids were going or had kids to go or whatever. But as we've done with athletics, we have put together and said, this is when it is. Whether the team qualifies or not, we're gonna put in for the field trip. So there's no reason that we have to wait until we have confirmation. Because us saying yes just gives them the approval to go. It does not say, you know, we're not expending any money, we're just approving them for that potential expenditure, so.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Do we have any other comments or questions? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-1. Alrighty, we will move on to information and discussion. We only have one item on our information and discussion. It is bid package number 10B for the Novi Middle School. Mr. Meinke.
Yes, on Thursday, July 7th, the district Board of Ed awarded the district-wide card access system to LaForge. So this is a continuation of our conversations. You're gonna see this as a recurring theme as we look at phasing in new buildings into the card access system. So I believe Justin's here and will be available to answer any questions you might have. This particular scope, which will be asked for your approval on December 15th, is about the middle school. And so I will allow Justin to share any additional insights or if you have any questions for him about this project.
Welcome, Justin.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, this is just another extension to the HS4 security hardware program that we've been doing throughout the district. They did their recent assessment of the middle school, went through all the interior doors. Any doors right now that currently have a keyed lock system is being replaced with this system is with the other schools that we've done the assessment on. And this is the $560,000 is for doing the entire interior portion of the middle school.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Justin? That you, Mr. Mena?
Probably not for Justin,
Okay.
but Mr. Minka, did we ever get a full breakdown of this particular project for all the buildings, whether what we've supported and what remains to be approved?
That is something that I can definitely get for you. The total package amount for the district is around $3.7 million, I believe.
Okay.
So, but this particular portion of the project is just the middle school. So Justin, I believe we can pull that together out of, out of the software, right?
Yeah, we do have, you are correct, it was around 3.7 million. For the total budgetary assessment on there. And on here, we do have their breakdown of currently where we're standing with all the amendments, including this, which is about 2.3 million right now. We've gotten through the two largest schools, which is the high school and the middle school, as well as done all the transportation and ECEC as well as the ESB building. So what we have left to do, we're starting the assessment right now on Deerfield, moving from there to Parkview, then Village Oaks, Orchard Hills, and then we'll be through the entire district.
Well, if we know we're buying these for all of the buildings, why are we doing it? Why can't we just put a motion together to approve it all?
It's actually a lot more complicated than I even originally thought, because it's not as simple as, okay, how many doors do you have? That's what it is, because what you find out is that there are doors that are leading to other doors, and there are closets, and there are all of these different things. One point that we discussed, I believe, at the last meeting also, is that these mechanisms, these systems have a push-button lockdown, and that particular component was creating some problems in our testing. And so these new locks that we're purchasing have a twist, have an actual thumb lock. Which makes them a little bit more, which makes them significantly more difficult to falsely lock down, right? And so what we're doing is we're looking at how we can incorporate some of the push-button systems in buildings like this, maybe where we don't have students regularly using them, right, and those types of things. So, but in terms of the why, they actually go out and do an assessment at every building, because the administrators, the teachers that are in those spaces can kind of provide an assessment on, okay, this particular room that you don't realize has a door on it needs a card reader as well. And so, Justin, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
The budgetary numbers were set off of historical drawings that we have of the buildings, but over time, those buildings have changed and whatnot. So the budget was carried for us to figure out what the overall number was going to be in general, but like Mr. Minka had said, going in there and checking the functionality of it and ensuring that, the assessment is done properly and they are assigning the proper hardware for the order and making sure that it's functioning the proper way. That's why we're going in, doing a little bit more of an in-depth assessment as we're going through these schools and basically carrying this out in sections and unveiling this as we go. And also, the other thing that we're working against on time is because this is such a time-consuming thing to go through and do these assessments at each of these schools, we're also trying to get these orders placed as we go, so that we're not dealing with a lot of the cost hikes that we're are naturally going through order like this. As time progresses, you have escalation costs on these hardwares that we're trying to avoid.
And I do wanna make sure it's clear too, that when these are not all installed yet, even though we're making the purchases, we're kind of going through and making the purchases to avoid those price hikes, but we're installing in a systematic way, right? So that, you know, the Roar Center is really our completed, I would say, guinea pig building, if you will. But as we go through and install these over the course of the next 4 to 6 months, that's our plan, is to have these things purchased in advance so that we can avoid some of the inflationary costs that we're seeing in the industry.
Thank you. Mrs. Roney, did you still have a
No,
comment or a question?
Superintendent Minka answered my question. I wanted to know if we were doing the twist, and he answered that, so.
We're doing the twist?
Mr.
We're
Cook?
doing the twist.
Justin, do you have a projection of how we're gonna come out compared to budget? Because with what we've amended and, approved so far, this would make it about 2/3 of it. And it doesn't sound like you've been through 2/3 of the buildings.
I can do the assessment on what we're projecting for the remaining amount. I don't have that number in front of me right now, but the 4 schools that we do have less are significantly smaller than some of the other doors that we've done throughout the district, so.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just didn't hear
Mrs.
Novi
Murphy?
Woods mentioned. Is that building already?
Oh, I'm sorry, Novi was, yes.
So we have 5
Yes, that
buildings
is
left to do?
correct, yeah.
Okay, just wondered. I wasn't sure. Maybe we'd already gotten
No,
to that.
no, they're not getting it.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Justin, thank you for being here this
Thank you.
evening. We'll get that information to Mr. Cook through
Yep.
Mr. Micah, and thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our committee report this evening. We have one committee report, and that is the curriculum committee, and Mrs. Murphy is the chair, so I know they met this evening. And
Yes,
we'll
we
look
did.
forward to
We
your
had a
report.
good presentation this evening. We had a few items on our agenda. We first had our, the financial literacy requirement overview, which is a new law that's in place for financial literacy at the high school. It doesn't really take effect quite yet, so we have time to plan for that. But we did get a little review of that and a cursory understanding of how that would be rolled out into our, some of our existing classes. And then we also had a grant review, which I think we all agreed, or at least we agreed that it was first time we've kind of had that be a part of a discussion, which I think that was really helpful. Also had kind of a discussion about grants in general, which is also really enlightening because, really, why would you not apply for a grant? Well, there's a lot of reasons that we might not apply for something, whether the costs would be too high initially or to man it or too many strings attached. Like, there's a lot of different reasons we don't apply for every grant, but we do have several grants that our curriculum department has applied for that a couple they've received, a couple we're still waiting on word from those. But I was really happy to hear that some of the grants that we've applied for can be used for things that we're actually currently doing from a mental health perspective and otherwise. They're not all new money. That makes it really hard to sustain because if you use new money, then eventually the money goes away. And then what do you do if you have a really good program that you want to keep in place? You have to somehow keep financing it. So anyways, it was a good cursory look at some of that. And I look forward to hearing more about, well, maybe not, I don't know. But I look forward to you all hearing more about that as you move forward, that will be hopefully an active practice, that the board would get information about where some of the grants are. I said, I think in all my years on the board, really the only grant that was something that was really on our radar on a regular basis, or we talked a lot about the board table, was the school safety walk to school that we did with the city. But other than that, I can't really remember like some active discussion about that at any level. So that was good. And then we had one item for information discussion, and that was our curriculum processes and approvals. And we just kind of had an initial draft of some work that the administration did to kind of come up with a program or a plan to both communicate and have a better understanding of the process and the responsibilities in our curriculum approval process. That was really helpful. I think the cursory glance was I think I could speak for my fellow board members that we agreed that it was really a good look and a good grasp of where the responsibilities lie and how they all work together to really help our kids through the curriculum and certainly help our community and our teachers and everybody else understand. It's helpful to have some kind of document, so I look forward to the final. Hopefully it'll be done, maybe, before I go. But, you know, seeing the final of that and what that comes to fruition so that that can be communicated out to everyone. Because I know we've had several different kind of things that have come up as a result of some of our curriculum and who's responsible for it and who approves this and all of that. So I think it was a great discussion about clearing some of that up for all of us. And then just talked about a little bit about the curriculum cycle, which Mr. Giramini, kind of talked to us about kind of the curriculum cycle and how that works and putting something in place where you're reviewing curriculum on a regular basis and what that looks like, which was also really helpful. So it was a great meeting. Mrs. Roney and Mr. Mena serve on that committee with me, and I think we'd agree it gave some good information. And then we briefly also talked about just, were you going to talk about putting things on agendas?
I was, but go ahead.
Oh, well, we just talked about having a standing item at the end of every agenda of a meeting saying future agenda items so that those can be noted. And then, making sure that if there is something that additional that doesn't get noted that you want to have discussed, that you reach out to the committee chair and then whichever staff member is, administrative staff member that's assigned to that committee to say, hey, I'd like to talk about this, and have it be at least 4 days before the committee meeting so that if there is additional information or anything that needs gathered, that can be done. So that was just a process thing that we kind of talked about so that we all understand, how to get things on an agenda for a committee meeting. There's
Great.
things that you want to talk about, so. Yep.
Sounds like it was a long meeting, but got a lot of stuff.
It was an hour and a half.
No, we were quick.
It was
We were
good.
quick.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for chairing that, and,
It's been a pleasure.
yes, we appreciate you. Next, we have our superintendent's report, and I will just turn it over to Mr. Meinke.
Thanks. I have a few items to update you on, and then I have a couple items that I need your input on. So, it's been, really great to see people seeming a little bit refreshed. I was in one of the buildings this morning, and they said, well, it just wasn't quite long enough. You think 5 days is a long time, but this is the longest stretch if you think about the start of school to Thanksgiving. And so people were gassed, they were definitely ready for a break. And so it was really nice to see just that little shot in the arm to get us through into the winter break. And the neat thing about the winter break this year, this is one of the first times I can remember, it's a full 2 weeks, but we kind of go through into December 23rd, but then we actually break all the way into the second week in January, which is going to be kind of a unique thing this year. So I know the staff is looking forward to that. I'm sure they can attest to that. We are as well. And it's just good. I think there's been a lot of research lately about the science of just students, and it's not just a staff issue. It's also that students need a break too. They need an opportunity to kind of have some separation from each other. And I think this is going to be a really great opportunity in a couple weeks. So we're pushing forward over the next few weeks to get to that point. Something else that I wanted to just update the board on, and also the community in general, and this is really exciting. Dr. Carino, and if you want to jump in and share anything about it, I'm putting her on the spot, but she actually did her dissertation on therapy dogs in educational settings. And so one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is systems and protocols and how we do this. So to kind of paint a little bit of a picture, we have some really great therapy animals in the district. The problem is that essentially what's happened is these animals have been trained, but they're people's personal pets, right? So I have an animal that I would like to have a therapy animal, be a therapy animal. We train the dog and then they come. Well, if the person gets transferred, leaves, retires, or whatever, the animal goes with the person, right? And so most districts create a system where we say, here's how we do therapy animals so that we can ensure equity across all of our buildings. And we can know that this particular building has the appropriate number of animals and this particular building does as well. So we are going to be launching this year an initiative for our therapy animals. And the way that it's going to work is that the district will actually own the animals, almost like a canine unit in a police force, right? And so we will own the animals. They will be bred by a breeder that really focuses on this work, and they train from the birth of the puppy to assimilation into the staff and into the school. They do a matching process. It's very, very well thought out. But this is gonna allow us to ensure that we're always gonna have animals in the buildings, that need them. And so the way that that works then is that our staff then would be able to apply to be handlers. And so we would have staff members who would actually decide, I would like to be a handler of one of these dogs, and then they would essentially become a part of that person's family, right, at home at night, but then they would bring that dog to the building that they're assigned to. And then at the end of that dog's service career, that staff member, that handler would have the option of then having the dog retire to their home, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a different way of looking at it versus a person owning the dog. It's actually the district's animal, and then we would provide for veterinary and foods, and all those types of things. So our goal is this is probably a 3 to 5 year project that's gonna make sure that we get all of our buildings equitably staffed with therapy animals. They are hypoallergenic animals. I know that issue's come up as well, and I'm really excited about it, and I'm also excited about the fact that some of our partners are gonna be able to help us in this endeavor. So much more to come on that, but I just wanted to kind of paint that picture to let you know it's exciting. And a really cool opportunity, because it's an 8 to 10 month process before we can get a dog into service. And the cool thing is that they have already been born, so we're looking at targeting fall of '23 for the implementation of at least 3 new animals into the district. So more to come on that. I also wanted to get some input from the board, first on committee agendas, and Trustee Murphy talked about this a little bit. When we talk about board committees, whether they're administrative committees or committee of the whole, my preference, and if you have something you'd like to do different, just let me know, but I'm just gonna propose that we have a cabinet member assigned to each of the 5 board committees. So Dr. Carino is gonna be working with policy, Mr. Jeremini with DEI and curriculum. Actually, I will be working with DEI as well. And Mr. Kling will be working with finance, and then CPC will be myself. And so there's a chairperson on this board for each of those committees. So my kind of hope is that we can just develop a process where the committee chair and the cabinet member who is overseeing that particular committee will work to get an agenda out, few days before, a week before, if it's a committee of the whole. If you have items that you would like to have on that, please give us at least 4 days' notice and send it to either the committee chair or the cabinet member or both. And then we will make sure that agenda is published in a timely fashion. So just trying to get us all on the same page on how we're doing that. So I just need to know if anyone has an issue with that, or if there's a different way you'd like to do it.
Any feedback or comments, questions?
We okay on that?
Certainly,
Okay.
if something comes up, you could send it over to Mr. Micah via email, but
Yep.
now's your chance to say what's on your mind if you have something to say. No? Okay.
Okay, we will move forward with that. The other thing I wanted to let you know, I've had the real privilege of being able to go in and meet with students. We've established these superintendent student advisory teams. Met with Meadows and meeting with the high school yet this next week. I've met with the middle school team. It's really been a great process. And so as we kind of move from that level of student voice, kind of the next, the final evolution of that, we would hope we would be able to create board roundtables where board members would be able to do that with kids as well. And so we're gonna build towards that, but a nice intermediary step. And I know during COVID, I've heard it said several times at the board table, it's been difficult for board members to get into buildings. In my previous role, in my previous district, we actually instilled a process called board tours. And what that is we essentially pick a few buildings, 2 to 3, and we pick a chunk of time. It's obviously gotta be during the school day, cause that's when our kids are in session. And we actually post that as a meeting. And we encourage any and all that would like to come, and then we actually go and see some kids and staff doing some things really amazing, and see the kids in action. So if there's interest, I will get that off the ground and move that forward. I know that some of you are working with your own buildings because you're all assigned buildings. I know that you're working with the principals of those buildings now. But if there's interest, I'd be happy to move the board tours to that next step if you're interested in doing that. So just need to know if there's interest, or if you would say not at this time.
Want that now or in writing?
What'd you say?
Want that now or in writing? email
You
me?
can email me, yeah, I mean, if you'd like, I guess if there's nobody that's opposed to it, I could set it up, and then if you can or can't make it on a particular time, that's certainly up to you.
I'd like to pray about it. I'm concerned that the way it is now, I can go into a building and talk pretty freely with whoever's there. If we do it per your suggestion, now it becomes an open meeting, is my concern.
Yeah, so technically, it's,
So then there
you know,
could be
technically, it's
25 people traipsing around a building versus me and two others, and
Yeah.
we're not really disturbing the kids, we're just
yeah,
going through and taking a peek, and
it's true.
so there's an advantage to that. I'd like to
That's
think
totally
about
fine.
the pros and cons.
If we were to do a combination.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't think there's anything that would stop you from working with your own building principals and, or myself and doing that. So I think you should continue to do that for sure. This would just be an opportunity to do a more formalized approach, right? So we would say we're gonna go and look at you know, say we're going to Woods and they're doing
Right.
something really cool. We'll go as a group to kind of observe that and see how that works. So it would be a little bit more structured. So. You can email me, though, your feedback. Be fine. That is all I have.
Okay. Yeah, regarding that, thanks for bringing it up. Mr. Micah and I talked about that a little bit, and we talked about just kind of making it, Mr. Smith is very diligent about trying to get into meetings and having these kind of one-on-ones or one-on-twos, which I think is amazing, and we should still continue to do that. Some board members kind of get overwhelmed when they look at the update and they see all these different programs happening throughout the district and really don't know kind of where to go, and they want to give equitable opportunity, and they really want to be in buildings and with kids. So I think that this is an opportunity to just have a more formalized opportunity for people who kind of, besides their own assignment, would maybe go in, and it would not be, 20 people, it would just be the 7 people. And just like everything else, when we have the NEF grants that were happening this week, we were all invited to go, and I potentially think maybe 1 or 2 people were able to fit that in their personal schedule to attend. So it won't be something that is mandatory or anything like that. I think that the only reason that we have to post it as a board meeting is because potentially 7 board members would be there. So,
Okay.
Well,
yeah, go
I
ahead.
just ask a quick question. I mean, I know that, I think being in the buildings is really important for board members, and I think I think our staff would appreciate that, as well. Am I speaking out of turn? Okay. So I think there is some advantage to, because I know that I have been in buildings, but I don't see every teacher, so a lot of times they don't know I'm there. Right, so they think that nobody's been there, or that there's no, we hear that a lot, right? You guys aren't, well, you know what I mean? I know that some of us have done that, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe they just didn't know. Because it's not like it's advertised, but this would be something that would be more formalized. The staff would know that we're coming into the building.
Yeah, and I think
And I
that's an
think there's a
important distinction.
value
I
to
think that, I know I can speak that our staff is very comfortable. I think Dr. Matthews was very present in the buildings, and so I think when I go into a building, it's not an abnormal thing for them to see me there. I will say that for some staff, that could create some concern or anxiety, right? If there's board members showing up without, right? So we want to know that there's a process for that. So when you work with your school that you're assigned, with your principal, you're going and, having a conversation and a tour, and that's totally, that's great. We should do that. We should expand that. This is an opportunity that's a little bit more, hey, everybody knows we're gonna come, we're gonna watch this, we're gonna see this. You get a chance to talk with staff. It would be a more communicated process.
Right,
So
right,
it can be successful.
yeah.
Guys, I guess
just-
maybe I'm missing it, so I apologize for being ignorant. If we post it as a meeting, then doesn't the public get to show up also? So why do you say there isn't gonna be 20 or 25 people?
Yeah, so they technically can, show up. It's one of those things that typically that's not been my experience, but if it was, I guess we cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, one of the things that we, so similarly, you could also treat it as when you get invited to, say, a Oakland County School Board Association dinner, right? That's not necessarily a posted meeting, although all 7 of you could show up.
I get all that. I apologize again. I thought I heard you say it would be posted as a meeting. So if it's
Oh.
posted as a meeting, then it's an open meeting and then the public is invited.
Yeah, yeah. So we can talk about those logistics, but yeah, I mean, obviously it would be unmanageable to have, 25 to 50 other people.
That's the only thing that threw me off. You said we would post it as a meeting.
That's a good point.
This is a good point. Yeah.
You can show up whenever you want. Citizenhood.
Citizen.
Alrighty, next we'll move on, were you done?
I'm all set, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
We'll move on to the administrative reports, Dr. Carino.
Thank you. On Tuesday, I attended the Behavioral Threat Assessment and Management training with Nicole Carter, Rob Baker, Darby Hoppenstead, and Detective Warren. It was a really great full day of training for our threat protocols. It was really helpful for us to see how far we actually are in comparison to a lot of other districts with regard to what our current protocols are. We received samples of other documentation that we will use to tweak our current process and improve it. We also undertook lots of different scenario-based situational kind of practice about if this situation occurred, how would you run the protocol in your own building or in your district? And so that's something we will be bringing back to our administrators to go through at our regular meetings monthly so that we can continue to improve our practices both at the district level and at the building level. For the past 2 days, I have been in Lansing for the MASPA, Michigan Association of School Personnel Administrators conference. And so it has been a wonderful opportunity to work with other HR folks about legal aspects and just really network. And so that's been a wonderful opportunity. And finally, after our last board meeting, we received some very sad news about the passing of Lisa Braun, middle school science teacher. She had worked with our district since 1995, and so I just wanted to take today as an opportunity to publicly honor her memory. That's my report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carino. Mr. Giramini?
Thank you, Dr. Ruskin. Mrs. Murphy did such an amazing job summarizing the curriculum committee meeting that I have only one update for you. We have scheduled our first sex education advisory board meeting. It's established for late December. We've communicated that to the members. They've all confirmed whether they can attend or not. I will acknowledge our original goal for this was the end of November, but combined with that element that we dealt with earlier, with so many applications, it took us longer to put the team together than anticipated, so that kind of pushed everything back. And so then, in looking at calendars and setting a date, this was the best opportunity for us. So I look forward to giving you updates and reporting out from that committee in the future.
Thank you, and thank you for that update. We'll move on to board communication. Any board members have anything else that they'd like to share or communicate? Mr. Mena?
Oh, I'd just like to thank the teachers who took the time to come out and visit us today.
I wish they'd
It's
introduce
great.
themselves.
It's great to, great to see them, and they got lucky, because looks like, I think, what do we average, a couple hour, 2.5 hour meetings normally, and you guys got
We
lucky.
can try and
You got-
stretch it out.
You got a short one, so, but thank you, it's great seeing you here.
Thank you.
Could each one of you stand and tell us what you teach? And
Yeah,
we could
right.
probably get to 9:30 at that.
We don't want to put him on the spot.
I know.
Mrs. Murphy?
So last night was the Light Up for Oxford support that the kids got to take home a bag and show their support for, because yesterday was the anniversary of that. And I think that was a wonderful, I know my neighborhood had lots of lights at the end of their streets. And yeah, I think that was just a really nice, it's not just a nice gesture, but just a way to show support and let the school, public school community know that we do stand behind them as a district. So I just want to thank everybody that, remembered to put those out there, because I think it shows that we care. And I think it also demonstrates to our kids different ways to show that you care. You don't always have to be present or do those things to demonstrate that to people. So I thought it was a great teaching moment as well for the kids that, why are we taking this home? Well, this is why. So appreciated that.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I just wanted to quickly acknowledge a community member and a friend of mine, Jason Smith. whose birthday is today. And I wanted to take a minute and, I was in a meeting earlier today with Jason, and, we're not prepared to make any announcements at this time, but, some of the work that we're doing. Some of you teachers may have had him present you with a grant. I know he and I have had the pleasure of being in many buildings, and him more than I. I don't know if, all of us realize that, Jason's efforts as executive director with the Novi Education Foundation, preceded by his time with the PTO at Parkview. He and I have a son that share, the 11th grade at the high school. Jason's raised over $2 million to directly benefit our kids and our teachers. He's a hell of a community member and a good man. So I just wanted to say happy birthday, Jason. I know he's probably enjoyed a glass of wine by now.
Hopefully he's not watching us, actually.
Anyway, thanks everybody. If you see Jason, wish him a belated happy birthday. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other board communication?
I-
Mrs. Roney?
I just have one little anecdote. You guys were talking about when you go into the schools, I always take like a tray of candy or donuts or something. And then usually the principals just say, this was donated by trustee Roney for you to eat, so they know you were there.
Oh. Good tidbit.
Yeah,
Way to set us up, Mary.
Yeah, really. So now all you guys are expected,
What is
you
it?
and Kathy,
What is it?
you just take something, that because they'll put it in the teacher's room.
Anything, sounds like treats.
Coffee. Keurig or Nespa, which one,
Any other board communication? Okay. Thank you again to everybody who came out this evening. I hope you all had a lovely Thanksgiving with your families, and I am ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Roney. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Sorry to interrupt your knitting.
Oh, my God. I can never do this.